Welcome back to the second part of the Michael Green files here on the Event Lighting channel. And just before we start, I would ask you to make sure you like the video if you find this content useful. It's going to help my channel a lot, and make sure you also subscribe if you don't want to miss any future episodes here from Event Lighting. But let's just get right back to part number 2 in Michael showing his show file, and make sure you also use the download link if you want to follow along. It is in the description below.
As far as the file goes, fingers crossed that I haven't screwed anything up. It should now work. And so from here is when we move into the actual Start Show view and the Start Show layouts. And this is where things can start to get overwhelming. The first few times you do this, I would definitely be like, this should be a shop thing. Do this at home, do this in the shop. Even if it's just with the 3D, spend some time. Don't take the file and expect to be able to go out on the day, patch some fixtures and kind of just run with it, because you will be overwhelmed. And that goes for a file that you've built yourself. Like when I was building this, I spent many hours in 3D doing these tweaks, building these things, seeing how they worked. I was lucky enough to be in front of a console so I could see that. It's not always going to be the case for everyone. But yeah, it was going to be overwhelming the first time.
But that's also that would also be the difference of building your own file where you know how everything works, and then going into maybe using your file, and you will of course get into some sort of trouble because you don't know exactly how everything is built until you get to know it.
Yeah, and there's things that I'm like, once again, looking from the video from Sean on Monday, like I don't have an emergency button, but that is such a good idea. I need to implement that. I need to have that. And I need to have like the other one is like almost like a crash button, is in the sense of like, if everything's going wrong, here's a button I can push that kind of offs everything, puts my stage into like a blue state or something, puts it into a state where I can just go and kind of reset myself, which is something I don't have. But that's, for me, isn't an issue because I kind of know where I am because I built the file. But the emergency one is definitely something I need to do, and I think that's such a good idea. I wish I thought of it sooner, or heard about it sooner, because it just hasn't come across it in my time yet. So this is the first layout view that I work with, and this is kind of a real good base one. I may not change this very much, depending on, like, sometimes you don't need to have a position for every song. You don't need to change your song. That's just my view. Some people may think differently. So this one, and the reason I come to this first is because I kind of build my base from this, and then everything happens over the top of it. And so the way this works for me is I can go through and kind of pre-select the position I want. I could actually go through here and edit this and kind of delete this bottom row for the position. So I could take the side light out. I could go here and I could delete the side light and all the Gobo and animation wheel stuff for the washers because they don't exist, just to make this more streamlined. But for this, I'm not going to do it. But so in here I can go.
Maybe as people can see now, once in a while we get like this graphical issue on the video link from you, and that is, as we mentioned in the beginning, just because you are very, very far away.
I'm so far away, but also so close if we go straight. Actually, maybe not. I think anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Someone smarter than me can go into that. So for this, let's just bring up, we've got our profiles up. Let's just, for the heck of it, kind of bring everything in so we can see what's happening. I'm going to keep the side light and the blinders off for now because it won't affect this bit. And here goes the frame drop. Let's see how this goes. Cool. So my position picker, I've built it is these ones will be empty. Sorry, just going to quickly backtrack. Presets, low center, mid center, high center, I do not create presets for with the macro because that is so very venue and fixture specific that you kind of need to make those on the day. And if your 3D is set up right, it can be as simple as selecting your fixtures, going to 3D, clicking over here, which has, this will be on the main main display 3D, but have the follow selection and then clicking on your 3D, and now you have your low center, and then you can click out here and have your mid center, so this is why 3D is also really building a 3D is really important. Even if it's not 100% accurate, getting it close will speed up some things like this, where you might then actually have to go through and just tweak a couple tilting pans for fixtures. But let's just store that there so we have something, and let's just give a little. It'll only be on the profiles, but that's okay. Cool. So back into StartShow. So position picker, you got your center, your straight, fan in, fan out, cross, blind position. So if you want to have them into a blinder thing, and then custom positions you can create. And so for this one, let's just do a real simple. Let's just do fan out on my. And you'll notice that nothing's changing.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is we're basically preloading this to happen. And then let's do cross. Let's do a low cross on the back ones. Let's go keep it mid cross and do a low cross on those. And so what's happened is I've preloaded this now, and you got the little flashing position go up here. And so when I'm ready, I can hit go, and they're going to snap to that position. But you can go, hey, that's really not nice. And the same for zoom and Gobo selection. You pre-select what you want, and you hit go, and it will happen. But we can apply fade time. So we can go, hey, we actually want this to happen over a 3-second fade, and you can put a delay on it if you want. So you can go delay. So now if we were to swap this and go mid-cross, fan, and trigger it, it's now going to move into that position based on the parameters we selected. And it will do the same for fade time. Yeah, and so it means that, for a couple of songs, I might have the same look, but, I might only be using, first song, I might only be using my washers to do everything. And then, second song, I'm bringing in, my spots probably a bit wider doing a Gobo thing. And then I'm slowly bringing the washers out. And then the third song, I might have, you don't have to move the position all the time. So I don't always jump in and out and change the positions every single song. But, once I've got it set, I might also have in my mind, like I know in a couple of songs' time, if I know the set or kind of know the type of music, I know I'm going to want them all doing, my low center.
Yeah.
And then it'll just sit
so
there
everything.
away.
So everything is just is a matter of you're loading everything, and that is the way your file is set up, or can you just pick them directly as well?
You could. So the way my file's set up is you have to load them. There is a way you could pick them, make them just happen. And the way you would do that would be if you go up here and set this fade time to 0, now they're going to move. Now, I only move some of them, and I'm not 100% sure, because what's happening is I'm using Rate Master to get this ability to not change until a specific time. So if I go and pick low straight for all of these, see, now it's very interesting that it's not doing it for all of them. We can look into why it's doing that. So if I go low center and we right click the sequence, so it's still got the rate master applied. So somewhere there's still a time, because the time is set to just a bit more than, it'll be the delay. Because the time is set to more than 0, the rate master is kicking in.
Yeah.
So I think if I turn that off, so if I did that, it's something people have brought up to me, and it's not high on my priority list to make a feature. I kind of, if I'm going to do a quick tweak, it's often on one fixture type, and I know I'm going to be doing, I know I'm going to be like quickly going, I want my front truss something to be a fan out, and now it's going to be a fan out. I don't know if that makes sense.
Where's the load information coming from? Is that from the sequence itself, or?
So what's happening is in the sequence. So if we go in here, I'm doing a few things. So when you pick one of these options, it's triggering a macro, which is making that appearance flash.
Yeah.
And then because I have a rate master position go set, I'm taking speed from rate. Rate master set, speed from rate. I don't know if I actually need that part, but I feel like I do because it didn't work. I should have read up on that more so I could explain it better. But what's effectively happening is by default that rate master is at 0. So I think we can bring that up by looking, if we go here and just click on, I always forget where you click for this here. And if we go master speed and we go to position go, you can see its current value is 0.
Yeah.
It's down. And so and if I can even do this another way, so I can go assign that to there, so we can see this happen, what happens when I trigger. So if I click this go button, that speed master jumps to speed 1, and then after a few seconds it resets back to 0. And so that's been done. Sorry? Yeah. And so that's all happening inside this sequence here. So when you tap on the go, it's setting master 3.15 position go at 50%, which is effectively speed 1. It's also offing that position, that macro that's making the appearance flash, and it's assigning the green back to the sequence, back to that go button, basically.
Yeah, I'm guessing if you wanted to, of course you would have to rewrite some of it. But I've been looking at tags and actually started implementing them in my own show, just for super simple things. But the tag feature will actually do so much for you.
This would have been so much easier to build if tags were a thing when I built it. So the lot of the stuff in this file have been brought through from like 1.9 and 2.0. And so it was built at a time when tags didn't exist. So yeah, if I was redoing this, or if at some point my plan probably is to actually rewrite this file and do some pretty drastic changes to it, I'd probably then utilize tags for this, because it would make all this sort of stuff so much easier.
Yeah, because then you can globally turn load off and just have a go plus, or you can globally do something to your file temporarily while you busk through something, and then you can reset a lot of things to something else, to a different functionality using the tag feature.
Yes, so in this file right now, no tags are being used. And that's just by nature of when I wrote the file. When I made the file, they didn't exist. But there's definitely a way to grow, and taking ideas from this file and building your own file, that I would definitely go, there's a better way to do this. You should use tags. There's a few other ones coming up that you'll see, I think, with the color picker and stuff as well. But also, the one last thing about both of these, and tying into this button being flashing, is also when you click it, it goes red and all this sort of stuff. It's all just timing, and it's timing that's built off by applying this fade time, this delay time. It's updating the timing, the trig time in that sequence for position go, and just kind of telling it how long it needs to be active for, based on what information has been given to it. Same for the fade time. Just adding information up here with variables and building the position delay fade.
Yeah, that's pretty clever, I think.
I felt pretty proud when I figured it out, kind of going, oh yeah, like I can do it this way. And like, because I knew I wanted something like this. I didn't want to just be like, smash the button and it goes. I didn't want to just be like clicking the button and then having like click. And like, I wanted to have this kind of ability to make a change feel designed and like important, because the whole thing is changing or not in the background. You may not see it change in the background, but I'm not having to do all these multiple clicks. Well, I am doing the multiple clicks, but I'm triggering it in one. And that actually came from I think it was Gaffo Design had the Rate Master Go plugin for MA2. And so it came from the way that worked, of using rate masters to kind of you applied the rate master to your specific sequences. And his one's way more technical than this, because you could actually do like a BPM tap to then set the actual fade time and all this stuff. That's all lure magic that I don't understand. So, although maybe, anyway, there's probably ways to do it quite simply, but it was all running stuff like that. And so, yeah, so like this, let me just let that clear in case we do something. So like this flashing is actually just a video file that's doing it.
Okay.
So if we go in here and I go 5037, so if we edit macro 5037, you can see my first iteration of this, which I've currently disabled, was literally just changing the appearance between orange and green every 0.5 seconds. And then the third line of the macro was going back to the start, and it was just flash, 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 flash. Downside to this is that if you forget you've got something loaded and it's flashing, your command line is now full of assign appearance orange, assign appearance green, just and your command line is huge. Even with the no ops, obviously that's great for if you have to up stuff. It's not gonna be clogging that up. But still, troubleshooting in the command line at times became difficult because this was going in the background, and it was also causing unexpected issues. So it's just filling up. So yeah, ended up just figuring it was like, I could just do this. I could just import make a little box that's just flashing between the two colors I want every half second, import it as an MP4, make it an appearance,
and then it's
away we
super
go.
simple.
Yeah, I mean, that adds, I think it's 11 megabyte video file. So it's going to add 11 megabytes to your file, but everyone should hopefully be using USB 3 drives now. So that should be a lot better.
That should be fine.
And not much of an issue. I noticed when I first did this with the video file, I was still running on a USB 2 drive for one of my drives. And I was like, why is this save taking so long? But yeah, so that's why. But yes, that's the position go. It's just rate master stopped, and then I'm triggering it when I want the fade to happen, and then turning it off. And for the Gobos, it was it's a similar process, but it was a little bit more complicated, because if I'm wanting to go into like Gobo 1 and trigger it in, obviously I probably wouldn't normally do it live, but there's no 3 on this one, there's only 1. The Zoom and stuff was getting all convoluted because of it being tied in and then trying to hit go, and then the Zoom information wouldn't actually be held by the rate master. It would just go. It was just like, hey, I'm ready. I'm gonna happen. So as soon as you change something, it would just happen live. But then the Gobo change would be waiting for your go button, and so that's why I had to split it out into separate presets, because there's some really awkward macro stuff going on in the background here, which basically grabs a global variable for group 1 Gobo focus and sets it to the macro, and then that's once again triggering the flashing thing. But it's happening different across each of the different Gobo wheels. So this one's, I must have found a better way. Initially, I had it happening across 2 separate groups. But like even in here, like this is setting the focus open, just the focus open information. And this is setting just the zoom. I have to go show this. Yeah. This macro is running this baseless file, and it was needed to do in order to split that information out, but actually have everything happen in sync. Otherwise, it was not happening in sync. And so what's kind of happened is when it says, group focus G1 is grabbing the preset small and is storing it at a new preset, which is called Gobo small for G1 small. So it's calling this Gobo focus whenever you select Gobo wheel 1 and applying it and the mid and the wide to a new preset. And then open is grabbing the open small and storing it at the new preset. And so it's giving this new information in the background, what's needed. And it was just a lot of fun macros to write to figure this one out.
You've been writing more than a few macros, I would say, in this show file.
There's a significant amount.
There is.
Yeah. I mean, although to be fair, it's probably not that many more than the file came with, or it's
No,
variations of
probably
what the
not.
file came with.
Yeah.
It's just how they're being used. So yes, that's the position layout picker. And you can also, sorry, once again, you can apply fade times, which doesn't fade the Gobo wheels, but it will fade the zoom. So if you were to go to a wide zoom here and hit go, it doesn't fade the Gobo swap, but it fades the zoom. So you can keep it in the in the same Gobo, but then change the zoom gradually in and out if you wanted to, between parts of the song on just the Gobo itself, based on fade and delay time. So that's nice. Position. I'm not sure if there's much more to cover here. This one is my animation wheel, but there's no animation saved, and this is my iris small. Which, to be fair, I don't think I use very often. It was just I saw it was there as part of the base file, so I kind of kept it and made it do some things.
Sometimes it's cool to have.
Like I said, this is kind of like the Swiss Army knife, but like that really big Swiss Army knife that is a showpiece. There's so many things it can do, but it's not always useful. But the options are there, and so because I know the file, I kind of know how I need to massage it to get to where I want to get in a song or for a performance. Which is just a time thing, and having built the file. So color is was the next. Well, actually, the next thing I did was my phases, but we'll just work down the list in order because it makes sense. So color is, to be fair, only changed a little bit. Only changed a little bit from the start show. So you've still got your same color picker with your color selection and your groups. The 3 additions I've made is the store color preset, which Sean kind of went into, but was, I think, something got a little bugged in the macro in the background. So I need to actually probably catch up with him and see what happened there, because he can probably fix it, or he might have already fixed it as well. But what we can do is we can go through and, you can set everything to red, and it snapped. So let's go, add 2 seconds of fade with a 1 second delay time. And now we can fade it nice and slowly. But if I find that, actually a real nice look that I had was red and orange on those and red on the floor, so you kind of get that color mix, and then maybe doing the opposite on the roof, and my side light was doing, a complementary, I don't know, whatever color combination you want. Blinders do nothing because they are just a dimmer, but that's okay. When I pick this and I have a thing I like, I can actually click my store color preset, which is putting a command into the command line here. And then I can click the color preset I want, give it a name. So I can call this red amber. And it's stored what I've selected into this macro, and it can recall it. And then you can go,
if you don't mind me asking, how does that work? How does it grab all these values?
So what's happening in the background is when you pick the value on the color picker itself, it's actually, each one is storing its sequence name into a variable for each row. So there's one variable per group. And then the store presets, I'll walk it through shortly. I'll just call this ocean or something. So I use this for different things. Sometimes I set it up ahead of time. I have color combinations I know I like, or sometimes for busking at a festival, if they've given me their set list ahead of time with like colors that they want for each song, I go through and do the song order from one to 10 with the color combos they want.
That's a really good idea.
Preloaded, and then I'm not having to kind of pick my colors. I can just come back to this page and go, okay, we're in song 2 now, and then away we go.
You're halfway there.
So what's happening here? So I've done that because it depends on the festival, but at WOMAD, which I've just done, for example, we had 1 hour between performances because other stages are happening, and so in that 1 hour I could spend time, building some new looks or, going through and building a thing for the show for the band coming up. So like if we look in, let's just look in blue, for example, the command for blue is setting user variable color group 1 with the handle for that handle for that sequence into a variable that can then be called by the store button later on. And I'm also doing something else cheeky here, which I'll talk about shortly, but we'll come back and look at that. So just ignore that bit for now. But that's just per color. It's just doing that color group 1, color group yellow is the handle that it's looking at. And then so once you set them all, and it can get a little funky if it doesn't have all the variables or at least something in it, it can freak out a bit. And it's something where I'm not quite learnt correctly in variable usage. And so I probably need to reach out. I'll reach out to someone at some point and kind of get some advice on this. But what's happening is if we look at this macro here, is the first line of it is color group target. So it's asking, where do you want to store this? Which macro do you want to store this into? And so it's set to execute no, which was what's putting it into the command line. And you tap on the macro on that screen that you want. And then once that's done, it's then changing the destination of the command line to that target. So that macro is now part of the command line.
Okay, so you can then store directly into it without having to specify where it needs to store it.
Yeah, so I'm now directly working inside that macro, and so set 1 is talking to line 1 of that macro, and it's basically going, hey, line 1 of that macro in your command section, which is here, put in Go plus variable color group 1, variable color group 2, all the way down to the end, with the plus in the middle. And so once it's done that, it updates that command. So if we have a quick look, we just look in here and see that's literally all these macros are is just a single line that is calling back the individual color, like the sequence names we selected in that preset. I just thought of it now, actually talking about it, is probably the way to fix that issue of where if it doesn't have information in the variable is I could do it per line. So I could have 1 line per group, and that macro is just storing and then if there's not information in there, it'll just skip past it. It'll just run and go, oh, there's an error here, oh well, and move on. So that's something I might need to change with it, to be fair. So go back in here. So then once it's set that, we go back to root, and then it goes, let's label color group target, and lets you pick a name for it. And then the last thing it does here, which I thought I'd disabled everywhere else. I'm going to disable it again because this is where it was causing issues, is I had set it to basically clear out those variables to make them blank, ready for the next time you picked. But what was happening is when it was doing that is if I went and just changed these ones and didn't change anything else, and I now store to here, and we go red. Let's just go Viper. We open this up. See, it's got these pluses at the end. That'll make it not run. It'll start going. It'll start going on some other random sequences, depending on whatever you've got selected as default.
Okay, so that's not a good idea.
Not a good idea. So I actually I thought I disabled it, obviously, which I have done now, but I disabled that from clearing out. So it means that next time I store information, it'll still have. Here we go. It's got that information there after I stored it, and those variables haven't been deleted. So that still has those saved as those variables. So if I was to change just these colors and store it here now, and we go to amber red, which is one we had earlier, and I go back into this, it's remembered that color selection. Even though I didn't change anything, it's remembered that color selection. And so, but I think, just having looked at it now, thinking about it, I think if I broke it into lines, I could probably get around that issue and then have an empty variable, so it is only changing the ones you have specifically selected. So I'll need to play with that actually after this, or tomorrow when I wake up again.
Yeah, because it's quite late for you now, isn't it?
Yeah, that's fine. I've been off. I just had surgery a week ago to fix my breathing, and so I've been off work for this week and the coming week. So my sleep schedule is whatever. The one last, the one last part of the store color preset thing and I probably should give it a new name, but it made sense. That I didn't put here because I didn't want to get pushed accidentally during show. If you go to Start Show Content Update, you can click this macro, which is color preset full reset. And I used to have it saying a lot more, but I kind of shortened it down. But basically what it does is it goes through, asks you a question, and then it basically sets all the color group names to color preset 1, and then applies that label to all of those macros. And because the way MA3 handles numbering of pool names, it just goes through and resets them all 1 to whatever it is. So if I run this macro, are you really sure? Okay. You go back, those are all now cleared out, and there's no information in there anymore.
Okay.
So on a festival, in a festival environment, I might change over between bands at 1 hour. At the end of the thing, I'd make sure everyone's off stage, and then it'd be part of my process. We go in here, click this button, I'd reset those color presets, and I was then fresh for either the next band's set list they've given me, or me to quickly just make some color combos that I know I like.
Yeah.
The next part of this one is my color gradients, and this is something that Sean kind of touched on a little bit in the file, and it's something I use a lot. I quite like gradients through my rig. I think it creates quite a nice dynamic, especially when using Gobos and stuff, and it creates some quite unique looks if used at the correct moment and correct time with the correct color combination. And so it's I think quite a unique way of doing it, because it's not using magic presets. Which is the typical way of doing gradients, but the restriction with that is if you're using color presets, you can't update the base preset that was used. Well, you could, but every time you had new fixtures, you'd have to remake your magic preset for all your fixture types. Whereas I wanted something that was universal and I could just load my groups and it's just there. But I'll go into that shortly. So color gradient across the rig. We have, a red, blue, or you can do it wings. You got inner, outer gradients or more, depending on the size of your rig. Most of my rigs will only need 2 wings, but someone else who was using my file had asked for more options. So I added in for them, which I'm happy to do. If people are using my file and they've got ideas and things they want to add, I'm happy to try and, add it in if it's something I think is achievable and is beneficial for the file. And another feature that someone asked for was actually the odd evens. So applying odd even to the output. So let's just go back here and make these narrow. And let's just turn a few lights off because there's a bit going on there. So odd even selection. And this is where it's playing up because of how I'm selecting the fixtures. So it's not perfect, but it works okay. But you can do an odd even across your fixtures if you want. If you want to, have a little bit more variety in your colors, that you've picked.
Yeah.
So instead of having to have a color picker with an extra 4 rows, so you can have profiles odd, profiles even, and things like that. And there's a way that I could probably, I was thinking back to Sean's one actually, he was talking about doing like a color for half the rig or something. There'd be a way to make this do that, I think, quite simply using half rig groups and stuff. So might be something I could play with as well.
But what is the logic? Because I'm noticing that your small thumbnails also change on that. And how do you do that?
I am super proud of this. It took a lot of time. I'm sorry for hitting my mic then. This took a lot of time. So what I did is, if we go into my appearances up here, and we scroll down to the start of where we've added most things, it's probably been in appearances. Most of the bulk of the additions was here. So what I'm doing is, depending on which row you're selecting, it's updating these two appearances here, which is back gradient. Is it? God, I'm actually going to have to remember where this is now. Jeez, putting me on the spot. I'm going to be on the second screen, but I'm not going to change to it. No, it's good. It should make me remember. I should remember this. So in here we're going. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, cool. I think I remember. I think I remembered now. Come on, Michael. You're better than this. So what's happening is the gradient, or the gradient active, is a image that is a PNG with a transparent, like a black to white gradient on it.
Yeah, so it's part alpha, I guess.
Yeah, so it's using an alpha thing. So if we go to my symbols, I don't think I put it very far because I didn't. Yeah, it's not with the rest of the symbols. This shows, like, by the time I get to a certain point, this shows where my care goes in terms of keeping things organized. So my symbols are like the last thing I think about, and they're just going to get shoved in.
Of course.
But yeah, so it's just this simple PNG with a color gradient applied to it.
Yeah.
With add alpha, I can't remember if add alpha is needed for it or not, but I think it is. And all I'm doing is in the gradient, I'm updating the image color. So if you see here, you can see that front is changing with what I'm, so I'm physically updating these values when you click red, it's changed that gradient itself to be red. That's just been done with this last line of the macro down here.
So your PNG, your PNG is just white, and then you add the color to it. So you don't have a lot of different colors. You just have white, and then in the appearance you add the color.
Yeah, and so that's for one step of it, and then and so I'm literally just changing the color, and luckily I can use pre-built appearances for that, so I can say property color is appearance red. Yeah. And then the back one is slightly it's the same concept, but basically going set appearance gradient, apparently old, and back. I think that's because I was using this is actually me still. When I built it, I kind of got so excited, didn't come back and tidy it up. But side appearance red, appearance back gradient. And so, this is actually an old thing. This is how I was first doing it, the second part. So it's actually obsolete, but I'm not going to delete it for now. So all it's doing for the back one is changing it's the back color of the, let's see if I can do this, change the back appearance of a square in the layout view. So if I right click and hit escape, we go set up. This may break things, but that's fine. I can fix it later with a few oops keys.
As long as you
but
can
it's
fix
basically
it, it's
just
fine.
two. I think I can fix it. We'll find out. Move tool. Oh god. I spend so much time in these windows trying to get this to, and normally just two finger swipe and move it around, but that's okay. So it's just two layout pull items overlaid over each other. So because the first appearance has that PNG applied to it, so it's got the gradient, when you overlay it with another color, it gives you a gradient readout.
Yeah, but it looks really nice. Instead of being two colors, you actually make a gradient, which is what you're going to see on stage if you click it.
Yeah, and it was just something I was like a touch that I wanted. I spent a lot of time on that because it was just a touch I wanted. That if people are going to use the file, I want it to make sense. I don't want it to be just this like kind of, figuring out by just, it's red and blue there, so it must be a gradient. I want it to be very definitive to know that is gradient, and that is what the gradient's going to kind of hopefully look like.
Yeah.
So that is, let's just go back to Start Show color. So that's that. So then if we just go back to here and just toggle that. Yeah. So yeah, it's just two appearances overlaid with a PNG that allows you to get that gradient look.
Really good. Really good idea.
Yeah. Cheers. It was like I said, the moment it worked, my brain was I think I was backstage. I'd been system teching for like a show that'd been in the venue for like 4 days, and there's a point in the show where I'm on comms for any issues, but I'm not needed to run anything in and out, and so I had a console set up behind the back drape, the comms headset on, so I could quickly run on stage and fix something. And I just sat there just like figuring this out, jumping from my laptop to this and loading image files and stuff, and it was very hard not to kind of make a loud noise and cheer when I got it when I got it to work.
Yeah,
it's like oh my god, it's finally it has it. So yeah, it was really cool. The last part to my color picker is this fader match color, and it's a little bit more of a gimmick than like something I use all the time. But I do find sometimes if I've had quite a biggish rig for me at least, and I've got a lot of things happening, I can sometimes kind of forget what my fixtures are doing if I'm being bounced around doing a bunch of effects stuff and then I'm coming back. And so what this allows me to do is if we let's set everything to white and we turn this on, if I bring up my executor, it set the background to white for all these appearances. And so on the actual console, that sets the fader color to that one. And it's kept my group colors because I like the rainbow. The rainbow helps me just differentiate it between my groups quickly. It could be any color, but the rainbow just jumped to mind because it's probably one of the few times I would use a rainbow would be in my group colors as opposed to on stage. But it's once again, it's just an appearance thing. So it's just going in the appearances. I have group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 specific, with the white being able to be changed. And so you won't see what I'm doing. I'm changing the colors on the color picker on the other screen, but you'll see it updated here. So if I click red, no, we're still set up on that one. That's a bit of an issue. Start Show. There we go. So if I select red, that's now changed the background of group 1 there to be red.
And then you can see your fader that what color they are in.
What color the fader is, and so I know that intensity fader. I'm going to bring up what color. If it's down, I can at least see what color it's going to come into ahead of time.
Also a really good idea.
And so then it's kind of, it's across each of the different groups faders. You can kind of see the colors. So yeah, like I do use it here and there. It's not something I have on all the time. It depends on the show, but there's an option to have. And then if you turn it off, it just kind of sets them all back to. It assigns a new appearance red, orange editor to those sequences. So it just basically forces them into that red appearance or orange or yellow. And then when we want it to be matching, it's just assigning that appearance that we're updating as its appearance.
Clever.
It's like some actual real simple things at the end of it in the macro. It's not a super complicated macro, but what it can do is quite ingenious in the right scenario, which is really the power of macros and having a show file that's running on recipes, so that you're not having all the stuff can be reused so easily. So that's the color picker. There's not a whole lot more to it.
No, but there's
now
a lot
we kind of get on to there's a lot to it. There's a lot there. This once again, like there's a lot. There's so much in this file. I'm gonna say every time I introduce someone, I go, it's overwhelming. It's gonna be overwhelming the first few times you use this. and I'll often be with them. I mean, I'll make sure that I'm there with them for the first, act or 2 acts if it's their first time being around it, just so they can ask questions or stuff, because it's the best way of doing it. So kind of moving on now. That's your base. That's your base for all your looks. You've got your position, your gobo, and your color, and your zoom.
Yeah.
And so now it's, how do we, in a busking environment, how do we now create that ability to, have movement? And so I didn't like how the start show file, you kind of would just, in the position phases, you would just, click a toggle on, and as soon as you click the toggle on for that group, it would start running. And you'd have to do that per group type. So it was, once again, it wasn't in sync. It wasn't able to be a synchronous effect across your rig. And so the first thing I built was, I'm going to skip one for a second. The first one I built was my position phaser layout, which is, once again, I'm just going to refer back to Sean, because it was a really cool video, and it was really interesting to hear those perspectives. This is complicated, and I like his way of like breaking it down to simplify a little bit. So there's some, this is going to change probably in the next couple of weeks to kind of bring some of those ideas into it, but probably on a whole new layout view. So keep this here as the back end. If people want to be this, have this much control, they can. So we're probably going to need to have the 3D up for this one, just to kind of see the outcome. And then maybe a few little things we have to play around with in my content update, and maybe a few groups that aren't quite working right because of those instances. So just bear with me if it's not working correctly that first time. So starting on the left of our screen here, just up from the top, we've got our same fade, off time, delay, all that stuff is still here. I got rid of the blocks and groups because I didn't see a benefit of having it in this view for this sort of stuff, personally for me, only because we can do that information within the effect itself, which I'll show shortly. Mm-hmm. So these are identical left to right for me, but left-hand side all relates back to one fader on my console. So if I bring up my executors, over here I have my position phaser 1 on a fader, which is able to be dragged up and down. And then beside it, I have position phaser 2 and color, and we'll get to those later, but position phaser 1 and 2, and you'll see the colors here, so blue and red. Yeah. And they've got a box around the two halves, so blue and red. So what we can do is, and it's going to look a little bit funky on onpc, in a live situation, what you're going to see on 3D, you don't see. It's just of how this works, which we'll look at shortly. But I can go through here and say, for my position phaser 1, I want it to only control my profiles, and I want it to do them in a grid selection. And I want it to be running a circle, and let's apply wings. And for this one, let's have no Y phase, and we'll leave the blocks at 0 and 0. And so if we now go into here and we bring up these, and let's just make them go, I'm just going to do this on the other screen, just as a little change, just so it's not using all of the, and let's just make them go, sorry, that was just having on a separate screen, but I was just making some changes. I missed the most important part, did I not? We only made one Gobo preset for each color wheel, didn't we? There we go.
We did.
Yeah, speed.
Yeah.
So now that I've grabbed those, I've toggled those groups on for this fader. If I now drag up this fader, you should see on the 3D that my fixture is going to start moving.
And they are. And
so now I have that control. And so I can, this is a size fader. So the lower it down it goes, it's going to do less of a movement. It's not going to be as big of a movement, depending on where you are.
And that's and all your position phases or movement phases are based on that temp fader, so you can control the size of it.
Yep. So all my 4 phaser faders that I use are all temp faders, and so it's because it's a temp fader, it's scaling in and out that information.
Yeah, which is something that is asked quite often in forums on doing like size masters and stuff like that. But this is a good way of doing it, I guess.
Yeah, and so like because the difference is a lot of those ways that other people do it, the way that I believe it's happening in the other way is that they have a button or a sequence pull item that they're toggling, they're turning on, that is the phaser, and then they want to have their fader down so it's almost stomping the effect, and as they drag it in, it temp removes the stomp, which is doable, and that's totally a way to do it. Like if that works for your workflow 100%, I've never worked that way, so that's just not a process that I know. And the idea from this, once again, has come from Jason Giaffo. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. Apologies if I'm not. But in MA2, he had 3 really cool live effects plugins called Position Effects, Dim Effects, and Color Effects. And it was this ability to have this single fader that you could then toggle on a macro that pulls that group into it, and then you bring the fader up and it runs the effect, and you can manipulate the effect through various macros and sequences doing updates to the effect. So that's where the idea for this came from. Is I had known that workflow on MA2, and I wanted to have a replication of that in 3, and no one had made a plugin for it, and I thought, well, why don't I just figure out how to do it myself?
That's a good idea.
because there's that trap, like, to be fair, those plugins are great, and you purchase them and then they work, and sometimes they don't, but you've got the tech support for it, but you don't really know how the plugins work. You don't written them, so you don't know what's actually happening in the back end.
No.
And you can kind of figure out over time, but
yeah. How is it referencing all the position stuff inside the sequence? Is it all recipes, or what did you put in there?
Yeah, so let's just turn it off for a second, just to cut the movement out for a second. So if we go here and we edit it, it's a single queue, and we've got a 8 recipe lines, so 1 for each group. Currently, it's using the overall grid group that I'd stored. So that means that when I run my effect, it is actually applying, theoretically, it'll run across correctly in sequence across the whole rig if I wanted it to. But I have made a way to change it to make sure it could just reference the individual grid groups if you want it to, depending on how. And you might need to, and I'll show you why you might need to shortly, because there will be a thing that's not going to work potentially right now for the dimmers. So it's an individual recipe line for each group, applying the circle. And so when I change whatever form I use, it's just updating the value here with a different preset. Each one has its own position phaser matrix. You probably don't need that. You probably actually just have one matrix for it. But I did find there was a few times when I needed a little bit, like for a show where I had not so much of position, but for dimmer and color, I had to go in and specifically per line and kind of specify some information. For like a multi-pixel fixture, just because I wanted to run kind of a little bit different from the rest of the matrix from everything else. So that's why it's like that. But for 90% of the stuff, you wouldn't need to have an individual matrix pull item. And then I'm also doing some filtering by worlds. Just making sure that each line, because I'm using, in this scenario, I'm using the same group across the whole recipe. This is how I'm making sure each line's only talking to that group. But the real magic, kind of magic of how this is working is, once again, using worlds, but applied to the overall output filter of that sequence.
Okay.
So I'm limiting what it's talking to and how I'm toggling features on and off is using world store and world store remove. So world store merge and world store remove into this world with those toggles, which I'll show you shortly.
So adding fixtures into it is simply just going to take it out of the world or putting it into a world.
Yeah. And then obviously we've got the position, speed master position speed, which I normally run on the custom master section. My 2 faders, those 2 faders on the custom master section for me are my position speed and my beat, which is actually color and dim. speed.
I think you
So
see
yeah, if we look at
another place where tags could be utilized in that respect.
Yeah, I probably could name that a bit better as well.
No, but I mean, in taking stuff
tags,
in and out of your recipe lines, tagging all your lines and just enable and disabling recipe lines via tags.
Well, yeah, and so my first iteration of this was actually doing a which I could, maybe it's something, it's probably not worth it right now because this video is so long, but I have my early iterations of this. So the macro I'm about to open up, before I did world store, I was actually just either storing I was storing a variable that was either the grid selection or linear selection into the selection item for that for each group row, and then I had a dummy group for each thing that if I wanted to turn it off, I could store into that selection area. So then it would remove that group, those fixtures from that recipe line. That was before you could enable or disable recipes or do tag stuff as well. But the benefit I found for me for using worlds is that so just quickly, so the benefit for using worlds is that if I have the effect up and running and it's doing those things across the profiles, and I know it's coming to the end of the song, I can actually toggle off the profiles for that phaser, and it won't affect the live output because that current sequence is running was using the original world before I removed them from it, and that information, as far as it's aware, hasn't changed until I stop the sequence and restart it.
Okay.
So I can then go into my, end of the song. I can deselect those. Still doing the circle thing because it's, whatever is happening, and I can go, hey, my next one's going to be, I'm going to want, for whatever reason, I can, change my selection to maybe just being my floor fixtures for the next song or something like that. But they won't update live until I restart the sequence. So I'll show that shortly. But yeah, so that's why I use worlds as opposed to enabling and disabling recipe lines, because that would be a live change that you would see.
Yeah, it would be a snap.
Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. I'm just gonna. So the macro for toggling on and off for each one, and this is the same macro, so I won't show it more than once, but it's the same one effectively across both my position, dimmer, and color phases. It's just changing which world it's storing into, basically.
Okay.
But yeah, so I'm using preview for this. So in MA2, we used to use blind edit, which was effectively a second programmer. Whereas on MA3, you don't have blind edit anymore. And blind is still the same programmer, effectively, as what you can output on, but it's just removing that from the, the actual output of the console. And so I wanted to do it in a separate programmer because it meant that, sometimes I've got stuff sitting in my programmer in freeze during a song. Because I've pulled out a specific light as like a key light or something just randomly because this thing has gone to a position they've never gone to before, and I don't want that to be something just removed because I've toggled a macro somewhere. So I'm using preview as a second programmer effectively, or a completely separate programmer. So I go into preview, I clear all, I select the group that I'm currently wanting to put into this world. And then I'm storing into that world with a merge and no confirmation. And I probably should actually have no oops here as well, to be fair, but I haven't done that. That would probably be a safe option because this isn't the sort of stuff you probably want oops to be looking at.
Yeah.
Once it's done this, I'll just have some water because otherwise I'm going to keep coughing. Once I've done this, I then clear everything out because I've done what I need to do with that world. And now I'm exiting preview. So that section of the world information is done, and now I'm just going to update the appearance. And because I've enabled go on that last step, it means it's going to pause there until this macro is now interacted with again.
Yeah.
And then it just does the opposite. Into preview, clear all, grab the group, store, remove the no confirmation, clear all, preview, update the appearance. And so
And that works.
all that's changing between, and it works. And like I said, it's probably not a perfect solution. There's probably people that prefer it to be the other way, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
My workflow and how I want to interact with it is this way. There might be reasons not to use preview. I haven't found any issue with it yet, apart from when you're doing on onpc, it looks like it's happening live because you can see on the 3D something start jumping around, but that you never see any of that in the real world on stage.
No.
With how fast it is. And so so then kind of the rest of it is you've got some more macros here. So this just lets you decide between whether that selection in the recipe line is going to be the overall grid or the linear position, the linear selection. And that's just going to change how the phaser is going to apply to those fixtures.
Yeah.
So it's just allowing for some variety, and it's just changing how things are being talked to.
Yeah, because sometimes
and then
using the grid is fine, but sometimes you want a linear selection because of some randomness or whatever, where the grid will actually not necessarily help you.
Yeah, and like one of the ones I often use linear stuff for is because with linear, so long as I'm on the fly, I know what my block's going to be. So if I did linear with a block of 6 on the mid profiles and back, it would actually then make like a tilt that does this because I've told it to be on those 6. Whereas if I did that with grid, it could do some funky things because of the spacing and how it sees the spacing between fixtures as blocks.
Yeah, definitely.
So yes, that's just why that's there. And then kind of moving down, the order this is laid out in probably doesn't make the total amount of sense, but it's kind of what I had to do to make it fit with the space. And I think if I kind of move to a system a little bit more like how Sean had it, where you kind of have pre-selected macros that kind of do some of this information for you, then it would tidy up a little bit. But starting here, we have our shuffle, and it's just a macro that sets the position phaser groups, and it does all of them all the way through. There's a lot of information in here.
Definitely.
But because I'm doing this is me where I was trying things out, and so I figured out I had to move to originally I was just using one matrix pool, and then I figured out I actually needed to move to an matrix pool per group. And the reason I did this is because of my shuffle. And when your fixtures are in grid selection and you apply an X shuffle to them, if you apply it to the one matrix pool, that shuffle is going to be the same on each line, which then means that the same fixture in line in the grid is going to be doing the exact same shuffle. So it's going to be in the same,
which you don't necessarily want.
Which you don't want. And so by separating out into individual groups, it meant the X shuffle that applies is varied across the 8 groups, and the Y shuffle. And I think I did Z shuffle as well, even though I don't really have any Z phase stuff yet, but I left it there as a thing. So it's basically saying shuffle. Yeah. And by default, this one is shuffling the 0. So this is turning the shuffle off as the default option for it. And then the second step is do shuffle. Please shuffle, do the shuffle. And so by doing matrix, and this is all stuff that was just this is something I had to figure out. I don't think this was part of there's nothing like this in the original StartShow file. So I just had to I just was going through the forums and was searching shuffle recipe, just typing in as many different keywords as I could think until something popped up that kind of had the start of this, command. So telling the position phaser one group wildcard, so all the groups 1 to 8, to please shuffle, and the one is the confirm, please shuffle, making sure it's not oopsable. And then because of the way this works for this particular one, you need to recook that sequence at the same time. Otherwise it won't update the shuffle. And this is one of the things where it works. I looked into how to get this, and this was just part of the information that was given to me, but I don't know the exact reason why you need to cook. But you do.
And you still do
And
in the newer software, or is it a previous problem?
Once again, I'm not sure.
No.
It's something we could remove and look at, but I think it's got to do with, because of the way the shuffle is being applied to the selection, I think if you don't cook it, the sequence itself won't correctly update that information until it's cooked. It was actually explained in the forum post I found, but I think I was probably on hour 6 by the point I got to this and kind of went, grabbed it, figured out how it worked, and then, molded it to how I needed to work, and it works. And so I don't touch it. So I'd love if someone, in the comments, if anyone's watching this, can explain why that has happened. It's great. I would be keen to know the exact reason for it. And I could read the manual to look at it, but it's it's the smallest part of this whole file, really. So it's not something I've delved into.
It's a small problem.
And then form selectors, exact same as the MA Start Show file. It's just assigning a preset at the sequence recipe line, but using a wildcard to make sure it applies to all the recipe lines that are in that queue, and updating some appearance information. It's just the same for each one. It's just saying, here's use this preset at sequence recipe Q1 recipe 0.1 through 8, because it's wildcarded. Wings, still the same as the Start Show file, although this, there's still holdovers here from when I was testing things and I haven't yet removed it, but it's affecting an matrix group that isn't used for anything, so I'm not panicking about it right now. But if that matrix group ever got deleted, however, it would make this command line not work. So it's something I should look at, or something I should fix, because that handle reference would disappear and then the command line would freak out. But it's just the matrix X-wings being set to none for 0, and phase transform being set to none, and then setting to 2 and applying the mirror on the phaser transform in the matrix that's been referenced by the recipe. Do we want to go through all these? I can go through all these macros and have a quick look at them if you want, but it's all doing the same stuff. It's just kind of going,
I'm guessing they're very similar.
Assign this information. Like, some of it's using global variables because it's just how it needs to apply it. Like the X phase stuff is kind of interesting. So maybe it was worth looking at that, because there is some stuff happening there, because X phase actually isn't from the Start Show file. That's my addition, being able to set it. So maybe I'll show this one. For X phase, we're setting a global variable, which is what we want our phase 2 to be, which is going to be 0. Yeah. And then down here, we're setting the matrix phase from, and I'll bring up the variable thing soon so we can see what it is. And this should probably be a user variable when I think about it. But anyway, here we are. So setting phase from, and so phase from in the variable itself is actually being told to be the specific property reference that's needed in the matrix to set phase from X to be 0. Yeah. So that's what this is doing, is it's calling in that variable, which is phase from X, and then setting it to 0. And then the next line is doing the X phase 2, which is once again pulling in a variable that says phase 2X, and then applying whatever we set here at the very start. And the reason it's using variables is because I wanted to be able to invert the phase. So I could have my X phase doing an opposite direction to my Y phase. You don't see it as much in the position movements, but in the dimmer things, it allows you to get things like a triangle forward or back, depending on how you select your phase inverts. So 0, 90 is just set the variable to 90, all the same, but it's updating that matrix based on that information. And then all the invert button's doing is, when you want it to go backwards, it's telling that variable that was phase from to be phase 2x, and phase 2 is now phase from x, and updating the matrix, so it's now just swapping, instead of being 0 to 360, it's now 360 to 0, and that's all the invert's doing, and that's changing the phase move.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's the same across the color phaser and the dimmer phaser as well. And actually, there's a guy, who was it? I think it was a guy called Rimu. I can't, RAMU, and I don't know where he's from, but he's I think Scandinavian region. Sorry if he watches this and I get it wrong. I apologize deeply. But he's what it kind of was like, hey, it'd be really cool to have Y phase in here. Like, here's what I've done to my version of your file with Y phase, look what you can do. And I was like, holy crap, that's cool. Yeah, all right, let's put Y phase in. But in order to have a Y phase, it necessitates using that overall grid group, because in order to get the Y phase to run through the rig, it needs to be able to have that Y phase information in the group selection.
Yeah, of course.
Like if your specific group grid selection had like 2 rows, then you got some Y phase there. That's great, but it won't be an all-encompassing feeling of the whole rig unless you have a overall grid selection.
Yeah.
So, and then just X blocks and X groups. So matrix, position phaser group with a wildcard, and send X blocks to none, or 2 or 3 or 4. The calculator is a little tricky because they're actually updating this number here depending on what you select, so you kind of know where you're at, because that was one of the things that the StartShow file didn't have, is once you set this number, it was kind of on you to remember what it was. And I have the memory of a goldfish, which apparently is actually really good for some people to say, but my memory is not great. And so I wanted to have a way to see what I'm on currently or what I had previously, because I may want to jump back to that at some point. Yeah. So, you can go in here and set this to groups 25, and now it's updated that for you. And that's
also a very good idea.
Yeah, and so the way it's doing this is just doing some global variable stuff. You're setting your global variable that you on the pop-up. It's setting the matrix information, and the next line down is actually now going into the layout view. So layout pool, position phaser, finding the name of that button, and then in the property for the custom text, updating it with that variable that you've just entered. So you've got using the same variable to then update the information. And then
you have in there you have the text being all the way up and to the right side in a special size.
Yeah, so if we do my favorite trick of right click and drag, you can actually left click and drag and then hit escape. We go in here, we can look at this. And so under custom text, this is set to, doesn't matter what it's set to because it gets updated with that macro line. And I've just changed the positioning of this. And it's all different per thing. Like it can never be the same because there'll always be like lines in some areas that will cover it. So I kind of had to make it fit the best way that kind of looked the best without it all being the same.
Yeah, that's quite cool, and it's a good thing that you can see these things, because then otherwise you would have to go in there every time to check, because you would have forgotten where you set it.
Yeah, and as I say, the amount of times I'd do it, and then I'd be like, next song would happen, and I go, for this one I think I want groups of 4, or whatever number it was, that I'd apply it, and then I'd kind of look at it and go, that looks the same as the last song. I already used that selection for the last song. Well, whatever. Just keep running it. Audience won't notice. Only I will. But so that's the phases. And so by having 2 of them identical, it just means that my second. Well, let's just get us set up for this. My second selection could be my front, my washers instead, and I could have them doing a tilt. And I could be having them shuffled, And so on the 3D, if I bring those up now, so this is where things might get. Oh, hello, that's a lot of information. Let's just bring those down. So those are not colors I normally put together, but anyway, here we are. But so here we've got these. So because of the fixture instancing, this probably won't work the first time. Just putting that out there now. So let's see what happens. So if I bring up this phaser, oh, it worked. Oh, amazing. I surprised myself. But that's just doing a tilt. So there's no pan information happening in there because of the universal phase that I've used. But what's happening is, because by default, I know what's happened. The last time I used this, I would have had it. I'll show this to you now because this is something that's quite important. Will be important to know, or something to understand that you can do. So this macro that kind of changes between grid and linear by default is overall grid for the grid selection, or linear position for the linear, for that linear group. But if we go into Start Show content update, I've made, and these might be a little small, so I might have to zoom in on them, but I've made a bunch of macros that will change the group selection per phaser per group, depending on what you want it to do. So by default, I had it set to overall grid, but obviously I'd never updated this after my last show, so it still held that information in that toggle macro. But theoretically, this macro is changing the other macro, which is the selection macro, line 1 property command to being assign group overall grid. It's basically just telling that command to be the overall grid information.
Yeah.
Or if we go into this one, it's saying, hey, that command should be assigned Start Show group 4 grid. And this is where it should probably actually be group 4 grid pos, but because of those groups that we made earlier, and the pos groups had all the main instances in them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is a toggle that you can flick between, and that will actually update what this line here says, depending on what you want it to do. If you want it to reference the overall grid or the specific individual grid for the fixture type or the fixture group. I won't do that on stream, but yeah, I should probably update this. Like I said, it's overwhelming. There's so much.
Yeah.
And there's macros for days, and it's just things that it's just basically I build something, I would test it sometimes on a show, sometimes on a console with 3D window. I often wouldn't test on a show unless I was close to that 95% sure that it was working well enough that I knew what was going on. If I wasn't fully sure of it, I wouldn't use that file on any show until I was confident. But that was one of the things, these macros are something I actually ended up writing between a rehearsal and a show, because I had done this amazing overall grid selection and all this wonderful things, but then found I had issues between I want my dimmer phases grid selection to be the overall grid, because I had my pixels. I had my individual fixture pixels in the overall grid, but I didn't have my main instances. There's just these things of how I made my groups, and what was in the groups. I needed some ability to toggle things around, similar to how the strict normal toggle works, which is a base part of the MA3, the Start Show file, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, you can select that.
Yeah. And as I've added new things, I've had to update those just to add the strict information or normal information to new sequences. But so yes, this just allows me that ability to, to be fair, I don't use it very often because you're not always wanting the whole rig moving, but there is that ability, if needed, in a song to go from a big all-encompassing movement to just a very slow tilt, or something, just a very gentle tilt thing happening across a different fixture type, or even across the same fixture type. If you wanted, you could actually have that loaded up to both be the profiles, and then do this, this fader change. change this effect. So we're almost there. I lie. We're probably not. We're probably halfway there. Anyway, so that's position phases. I think I've covered pretty much everything.
Mm.
And it's definitely something that, once again, if you're going to try use the file, please do. Like, that's why it's there. But also, spend some time playing with this, using the 3D view before you go on a show, because you'll not have a very good time the very first time you use it.
No.
The one thing actually is that these still are just referencing they're still referencing the matrix, but it's because it's applied to that sequence. It does mean that my button down here can be a toggle button. 212 can be a toggle button, so I can actually toggle this on and off with a fade time.
Okay.
If I wanted to. So there's some other ways to bring effects in and out, as you can fade into the effect depending on what you've set here. Sorry, that was set to 0, but you can set it to a 5-second fade on and a 2-second fade out. And so now when I toggle out, it's going to take 2 seconds to fade out. They have a much slower entry into it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. So that's position. Welcome to this madness. So this is my color and dimmer phases, which just a single phaser for each type. I haven't gone to the level of having 2 of them for color and 2 for dimmer, because I found that it's not very often that I want my color effects to be on 2 faders that I'm changing between, if when I use them. And so it's all the same stuff, just laid out a bit differently from the position one. So the blocks and the wings and all this does the exact same thing based on recipes. And all these toggle switches do the same toggling into the color effects world. But you can, pick your high-low color and set it to, that's actually, I think, a snap-on. Yeah, I changed it around because I wanted to snap on for my color instead. And we can apply this here. And then if we bring the fader up for color, we should see a little weird police siren chase going on.
Yeah, it's doing something. It's very hard to see with the Gobo in, so maybe if you could take the Gobo out.
We'll get rid of the Gobo. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Also, all the haze probably isn't helping. I can probably turn that down, but
that's fine.
So yeah, and so that's the that's wearing a hair color phaser, and then using that that in that master section, that beat fader, you can change the speed of it. And I have tap tempo buttons, up above this section here. I've got the beat buttons that all do certain things. So this one's doing setting it to speed, ones are setting it to 60 BPM, and then the other ones are setting it to a tap tempo or halving and double, half speed, double speed for each of them. So it's just options there for how you want to interact with the BPM. And it's actually, there's a guy that came through, because I've always struggled. I don't know why. I used to play instruments all the time, so you could keep a tune, but I always sort of struggle with getting like tap tempo of effects to properly line up with the effect. And so I was always kind of riding the speed fader to try and get that to match right, rather than being a proper tap tempo button. But yeah, this LD from Australia came over and we're talking about it, and he goes, "Oh, is this, you just kind of play with the measure of the phaser, kind of how you set the measure of the phaser?" And I was like, "Oh, mate, how did I not think of that?" Oh my god!
That's what it's there for.
Playing with it. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that when you say that, it's like, that makes total sense. I just never clicked to me, but yeah, being able to set your speed based off your tap button is quite vital, and so there it is. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I could go through all these, but it's all macros that are doing the same. It's just updating recipe lines and or matrix pull items. And then dim phaser, same thing. You can select. It probably won't work on the wash fixtures, but we'll give it a shot anyway, because why not? Let's get that movement stopped so we're not going crazy. So much going on. Let's bring these down, because this may do pixel stuff if we've done it right, or it won't. So there's a lot of information there. Let's scale back. Let's get rid of those 4. Let's just do those fixtures. So in here we can select our wash front. Let's off wash 4. We don't want those in there. And we can say it's a sign, and we'll leave everything else the same for now. So it runs across it, and they should be in grid selection mode. So let's bring our fader up and see what happens. It's probably going to be quite fast, so we might need to slow it down, or it'll do nothing. And so I imagine that'll be something to do with the fact that they're in overall grid. And so that was that selection I was talking about before.
Yeah.
So because in the overall grid group we don't have the pixel information, it doesn't know what it's talking to. And that's why it's red for 4 and 5, which is those 2 groups.
So what if you change that to normal in there? Just would that do anything?
So I think it will, but I think there's yes, it does. Yeah. So there was something I had.
It's trying to look into the instances by itself.
Yeah, and so there was something, and I get the feeling it was something to do with how a fixture profile had been built, and there was some way with how it had been built and how it was looking at the hierarchy of the dimmer information, and even when it was in normal mode, it seemed to get stuck on that first hierarchy's dimmer, and it wouldn't let you then go down a level into the beam, like the actual pixel dimmers for some reason, and so that's why I kind of, and it was I think it might have been the Cameo Evos lights that Walking Council had, that was like kind of my main wash light that I was using for 2 years. And so while it's a really lovely light, it's just because of how the fixture profile been built, some things didn't always work using the built-in options that MA has provided. And so I had to kind of get creative with my my selection.
Yeah, but it's also, doing a show file like you've done, I think using the strict mode would be what you would do. I mean, you don't want it to be in normal mode because you want to be in control of what if you have instances.
Yeah. And so that's where kind of this one down here, so our dimmer phaser grid selection, if we come here and say, hey, 4 and 5, I want you to make sure you're using the grid selection per group. And we go back here and we just have to retoggle these to make sure. And now that is now being applied, although apparently with a snap to it. So that's cool. I think that's just how the 3D viewer is interpreting it.
Yeah,
because if I'm looking at the actual head, the pixel heads, I can see it fading around. So I believe that's just how it's talking to it. Or it could even be my selection might be if the pixels in a weird order, so I might have to flip some. You might need to just play with those groups just to flip the selections around, because it should be doing a dim sign like it was before, not a snap on, snap off. That should be there you go. I think it was a mixture of having the Y phase and the X phase applied to it. So I've now got my Y phase only. I've turned my Y phase off, and it's just X phase, so you can see it moving across the lights, across the pixels.
Yeah.
Or the wings of 2, so we can see it coming in. Or the shuffle. Which in real life, when I had it just exact same setup at WOMAD, I didn't have the snapping effect. So I think it's just the 3D, how the 3D is interpreting it. But
yeah.
So that's my phases. So having kind of everything boils down to me to these 4 faders. Having that kind of ability to how I control, how my rig's going to change dynamically through a song is based off these 4 faders, and what I've toggled into them and out of them. Which is a feature that I like, but there's, as you say, when you can, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely.
And so the next iteration is definitely going to be a simplification of this on the front end, while still having the ability for people, if they really want to, if this ends up making sense to them, like it kind of does to me, then there will be this. It'll still be there, but having that simplification is going to be, I think, quite a big jump.
Yeah.
And I think it's well worth going back for people who haven't seen it, looking at Sean's video with how he's done it, because that, I think, is a really good, tidy way of kind of having the same ability, but without this, massive amount of options of need for clicking buttons to get these options. So
And
I think the
his
last kind of thing,
organization was so different, wasn't it?
yeah, and that's something I'm going to probably, borrow and adapt, is like how I do my preset layout here is probably going to change. It's probably going to kind of morph, like how he did his one. Just when I looked at it in my head, just kind of actually clicked quite strongly with me. And so this is actually just a fallover, I'm pretty sure, from how the StartShow file might do it. If I'm thinking correctly, I think I've just kind of kept that as how the StartShow file presented it from memory. I can't remember 100%. Yeah. So the very last thing for me, and I'll just make sure everything's off, is bump buttons, which is kind of my answer to the loss engine not being what I wanted it to be. The StartShow loss, like live output, is really cool. There's some really cool things you can do with it, but it didn't quite scratch what I needed for bump buttons. And so I kind of ended up building my own. And so the first version is the one that Sean had, which, as you said, this is my view for it. He just had it changed how he had laid it out. But it's all the same thing. And so it gives us ability to change your selection of each of the type of things, whether it's going to be a grid selection or a linear selection. And these arrows allow you to select certain things. So like if you had a delay time of 0.5 set right now, that'll be a delay 0.5 on the on and the off for that bump button.
Okay.
But if you click this, it's now only applied to the on, and the off will be a whole fade off with no delay applied to it. Or this way, it'd be whole thing fades on and then delay is off. So
very nice.
It was
so that just toggles every time you touch it?
Yeah, just every time you touch it, it toggles it between the 4 different states. Or this is there's no delay. The delay is off completely now. It's just on off, which would be the same as having this set to 0. But it means you could have your profile fronts doing it on off, but your profile mid backs are still going to have the delay applied to them if you wanted for how you want your bumps to happen. And then you can apply some things. So based on having your on fade off time and all this, which changes once again the delay on off of the bump. You can then apply either you can say that it's going to delay on across your fixtures, but the off that follows is actually going to shuffle across the whole thing and shuffle out kind of like a firecracker idea. So it may not work so well on this. It was kind of built to answer a need for a rig that I had, was just a whole bunch of pix bars kind of outlining a stage. But it does work on normal fixtures. It's just the shuffle stuff is not as noticeable often. But currently they're up here. They used to be down the bottom, but I have made some modifications to. I've made a new bumps thing that I'm trialing out, which isn't yet in the main file. But if we do this here, for example, if I grab this, I can't remember what button it is, but I think it's a temp button, or it's a go button for this bump group here, which has Q1 at full and Q2 at release. So if I trigger this now, we're going to see that those Vipers on my LX1 doing the bump on. And because we had said that, interesting. It should be doing. There's no fade time. I think that's probably why. So let's do this. I may have broken it potentially with my new bump thing, so it may be obsolete. We'll find out.
Then you have to fix it again.
A little bit obsolete. Yeah, we'll have to fix it again. That's just the way it goes. It's just the nature of it. There's a lot of stuff happening there. I can explain better what the new ones are doing than what these are doing, because these are built at a time. Yeah, so it's just, for some reason, it's not applying the delay to it, and I don't quite know why it's not, but I won't look into it now, because I don't really use this one that much anymore. I've kind of moved to the new way of doing it, and I'm not sure yet if I'll go back to this or not. Well, that was doing it. I think that's doing it now. Okay, whatever. So, okay. Bump buttons. Okay, per group. So group 1, delay running through it. And so that was just my normal delay with a fade time set to it. And it's across, the different fixture types and across the pixels of all those fixtures. But then we could go, hey, let's shuffle the off. And we go back to here now, and I can turn on, and then you can kind of see how it doesn't actually turn off in that specific order. And you probably see it better across these fixtures. You can, if you look across the washers, I might need to zoom in on that to make it visible. Good luck, everybody. Let's see how this goes. All right. So let's trigger that again. So going across, it's shuffling out across the pixels by applying a shuffle to just the off cue. Really find it better if you do it that way. But once as I use this, I kind of found that while it's a cool system, and once again, there's so much flexibility there that it kind of becomes overwhelming. And even I was finding it overwhelming of kind of how I used it, is that I kind of moved to what I think is more of a traditional bump setup that a lot of people have, where let's just reset this camera so we're back to, come on, you want to, which is kind of doing, if it works and I set those groups up right, this should do something. Oh no, I know why it's not doing it. Bumps v2, let's toggle those. So I haven't got names here yet. So these are just macros that are toggling those groups we made into a bumps world. So that's why it's not working. So yeah, if I run this one now, it's doing the first step of that. So that's doing, this one is bump all. So it's doing every single group that I've toggled on is running this bump through it. And it's sharing these macros that are here actually are being shared. It's the same macros across the two, apart from the wings, because that's applied differently to this stuff. But so you got your all, so every single fixture that you've currently turned on. This one is an out to in.
Okay.
And you've got into out. So I think this is something I've seen on other people's files a little bit more, where it's kind of a bump button that you kind of run, and it's got, each bump button does a different thing based on what group's been stored into it. And so this one here will just work through those 4 different bump groups we set based on what's been selected. So if we went in here and we turned on group 2, that'll turn on the floor. I should name these. It'll turn on the floor bump. So if I do my bump down now, there's my floor ones into it. So I've got bump 1, bump 2, bump 3 on the back truss, and then bump 4 on the floor.
So all in the same bump button.
All in the same bump button for these ones.
Yeah.
And it's just, having played with this on a couple of shows now, I like this a lot more than my original bump solution at the moment. And these ones won't work because these are the ones that we those vertical groups I didn't end up making. But you got a left and a right, which actually by default shouldn't have any delay set to them, but I think has received some delay information through. I forgot how my whole bumps thing works. I has received some delay information through here, so if that was set to 0, that would probably be working. I wonder where I managed to get that from. There shouldn't be any delay there. Well, I can quickly show how the bumps are working. So when a bump button's pushed, so for example, bump down, and I can probably actually, if I go here, I can make this go. Perfect. So when you push the sequence button for bump down, all it's doing is each of those 4 cues is a command that's triggering one of these 4 sequences.
Okay.
And so the
So it's
reason I
just
did this is
referencing,
because,
each cue is just referencing something else.
yeah, so it's just a thing saying, hey, this cue here, I want you to go sequence bump 1. And at the same time, across all my bump buttons, I'm loading the next cue that I want it to fire, which then means all my bump buttons are actually in order. So if I was doing a left to right bump, it means the next time I hit it, it'll be the same. The next fix, there'll be the correct next fixture group will be then running that. Like if I go left on that one, the next button on the next side is going to go that way. So you can get some more dynamic bump buttons because I'm loading up what is going to be the next go across all my bump buttons, which is why they're all flashing Q1, because the next thing from this guy is going to be Q1.
Yeah.
And all these are is just a normal bump. It's just a cue it for cue it release with a recipe for each one, going either at full, at release with the E matrix applied to it. And then timings are set based on what's been selected in that layout view that I had before. You could select the on-off fade time. These ones are meant to, and I had told them to ignore delay, but apparently it snuck back in somehow. So let's just go and set my left and right to not listen. I should always give it its own matrix pool. That'd be the best solution. But
yeah,
this is one of the things that I end up building. I built this on WOMAD when a lot of the breaks I had. Outstanding. Oh, that's the wrong one. No, that's the right one. I have to figure it out. I don't know why it's doing it. It shouldn't be. It wasn't doing it. Yeah. This is one of this
doesn't matter. I think we get the point.
We've got the point of it, yeah. But this is one of those things is I use the downtime between acts that WOMAD to build it. But yeah, that's the file.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot. Like, the process of building your show file can be a monumental task. And knowing it inside out is kind of the vital part. And so diving in and looking at how everything goes, like right clicking, edit, hitting edit key and tapping on every single thing you can and just looking at what it's doing and kind of following that path, start from here, go, okay, what's this doing? Okay, so it's going to this matrix for, okay, so what's this matrix? That's the process of dissecting the file.
And then as soon as you start understanding how things are built, it will be more and more logical, I guess, for you figuring the rest out, because they kind of know the thought process behind it after that.
Yeah, and one thing that's really quite useful, it may not work so well here, but we can look at it. I can quickly show you somewhere else, is using list reference. So list reference here is if you hold EMA key and push the list button, it brings up this as a shortcut key to get list reference. But you can click on something and kind of go, what has this been referenced by? Like, where is this? So you can kind of see that, hey, this sequence in this pool is being referenced on page 1 on exec 109, which is the bump button, on the physical surface. But you can even get deeper because in there it has depends on. So you can look at like some of the appearance stuff. You can see that appearance depends on this symbol, but it's being referenced by all these macros or all these sequences. And so that's also another really useful thing, is use list reference and kind of look at things and kind of see where things are going, because it will help you kind of get an idea of how it's all functioning.
Yeah.
Because at the core of this, by being recipes, it's actually the recipes part of it isn't complicated. The recipes is, the most simple thing. You have a group, you have some values, you have an matrix, and it's just how your macros are changing that on the fly for you and how you interact with it.
Yeah, and once you figure out how the recipes work and the strict and normal thing and all this stuff, and how you can apply a matrix and all this stuff into it, I mean, then you're done recipeing.
Yeah, like the only time I really touch recipes on this file now is when I'm building something new. If I've seen someone, if I've been front of house systems tech for a show and I've seen something that someone's done, that was like the bump buttons. I saw someone had a similar kind of idea with their bump buttons, and I kind of talked to them about it a little bit. I didn't really go into the nitty gritty of it. I just kind of saw how it was functioning. I was like, okay, that's cool. So that's that step. But I I made it my own way, working backwards without seeing their stuff. But yeah,
that's cool. I want that.
Yeah, it's cool. I want that. How do I build it? And then you go down a very big rabbit hole of writing a macro, testing the line, opening up the command line and going, okay, what happened?
Why doesn't this work?
Why didn't it work? What have I typed wrong? But handles is a real big thing. Using the handles and having things not break is a real big thing now, I find, because that was something that I used to do all the time on MA2 and in my early file, is because everything was referencing a name or a number in a pool. I'd move one thing not thinking about it, or I'd rename a thing not thinking about it, and now half my macros are broken because they were referencing that specific name or that specific number.
You're not using that
handles.
one where you refer to the object instead. I think they introduced it in 2.0.
Well, yeah, so I basically rewrote my file to do that. So I think they're calling it handles. I could be wrong about this. I feel like it's been mentioned to me as being handles. So that's if you look in here, that's like anything that's yellow is a handle.
So okay, now I get it.
This hashtag with a square bracket, what you're trying to interact with, and then you put the name in.
I didn't notice because you don't see the hashtag in the line.
True, yeah, and I didn't really go into the lines themselves, so that's I could have explained that. But yeah, having handles and having that ability to have this thing that I can now rename the overall grid to anything, and theoretically everything I've written will reference it. I know where it is going to break if I did that, so I won't do it. But there's a macro that I showed on the update page that'll break from it, but we won't go into that.
I think when you do PSR out of a show file or something like that, there have been examples of Fs everywhere.
And you don't even have to actually PSR anything. I don't know if they've fixed it. I did see something about it in the latest release note, so it may be fixed. I don't really PSR, so it's not something that's affected me personally. But I do know there's been 3 or 4 people that have used my file and it's all broken because they've just opened the PSR window to have a look at it because it was this new thing that had been brought in. And as soon as you open the PSR window, it does something in the back end that just wipes out half your handles. And it's just like, oh crap, and they're all gone. The only way to get them back is to reload the file. And it's like,
done.
And I opened it once as I wonder if I'll PSR my old StartShow file to the new one. That'd be kind of fun. Don't know why I didn't need to, because it's not importing anything I actually need. But did it not thinking, and then went on to a show. Luckily, it was a show that was just here's 4 lights at the back, 4 lights on the side, and some front light. And none of my stuff was working, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realized that I had done this little PSR thing as a trial, and it just wiped out all my handles with those references.
Let's hope they fix it.
So on my GitHub page, I think they have, but I'm not, like I said, I don't PSR at the moment, and so I haven't really gone back to look at it because it doesn't affect me. But there is a big warning on the GitHub page kind of saying, don't do this. If you do, it'll break things. And I provide support to a certain level, but I'm not, well, apart from today, I'm not awake 24/7.
No, sorry.
So no, it's not your fault. I mean, I suggest the time. But yeah, that's the file. That's super in depth. I have some videos on my profile that's kind of going through some of those steps, but in like a 4 or 5 minute format.
Here we're going to do it in a 3-hour, 4-hour format.
Yeah, and well, I enjoy talking about it. I enjoy explaining my thought process, and actually, as we went through it, there's a few things that I figured out by talking about it. So that's one other thing is, if you can, when you're doing your file, make sure you talk to people. Make sure you, I had a person that I work with, a guy called Conan, and it was really good, on days when we were able to kind of sit there or he was nearby and I'd be doing something and he'd come over and go, it'd be really cool if it could do this. And I'm like, that would be cool. And then we kind of sit there and figure out how to do it. Or
this
vice
is how
versa.
you
I'd be
learn.
like, and it was like, there's a few times where I was like, I was stumped on something. And like, we're just talking about it. And as we're talking about it, like, Conan might not have specifically had the answer, but by talking it back and forward, it changed how I thought about the problem. And then by tackling it from a new angle, I could do it. So yeah, like using the resources like, the EventLearning Discord, even like the Lure Dark to Light YouTube channel is doing like a Lure programming course, has their own Discord channel. There's the MA users Discord channel. There's the Facebook, there's like 4 Facebook pages. There's a Reddit, 2 Reddit pages. Like you've got all these resources for asking questions, and no question I think is, I don't think there's any silly questions.
Nope.
I think any question is a good question, but you got to make sure you're coming from it from the right angle. Coming and going, hey, I want you to do this for me. It needs to come in and be like, hey, I'm trying to achieve this.
Yeah.
Here's what I think I've got.
Where would
Do you have
I
any
start?
suggestions? And then where would I start? Or like, hey, I don't have any idea, but this is what I achieve. You've got some ideas for where to start looking at this. And that's just that thing of, you talk it out, use those resources, but just be careful, because you don't want to go in kind of demanding and begging. I need this, do this for me.
No, and you will see that sometimes.
Is great. Like, you'll see it, and there'll be some people who respond to it nicely, and some people won't respond to it nicely. And it's just, I think it's on all of us to be kind. There's actually a really cool initiative in New Zealand, which we were talking about earlier. So I'll bring it up, but I won't show the thing. But it's basically there's a red card and a green card. And so the red card on one side says, don't be a dick. And then on the green side, it says, be kind. And it's just a gentle reminder sometimes you're on a gig, you might be tired, you might be stressed. But there's no need to be a dick. You can still express your frustration, but be kind about it. And so that's the same thing, I think.
And it's not a thing in the business in that what it was 20 years ago, where people were real, not very nice people just because they could. I mean, we don't see that very much anymore in Northern Europe anyway. People are really, really nice to each other, and really
it's
helpful
definitely,
to each other.
And I think in industries like we were talking, we were kind of talking about the other day. So in Denmark, in New Zealand, we don't have big populations. We're like 5 point something million here. You guys were, I think, 6 something.
Yeah, just below 6.
It's not a big population number, and so it's a small industry, and so everyone talks, and so just being kind, and if you're asking questions, just ask politely. But if you're responding to questions, just understand where they're coming from. And just be nice. Just be polite.
And you'll see that sometimes in Facebook groups and other channels where people will get annoyed if people ask the same, or new people ask the same question as which has been asked before. So sometimes maybe you can be in a group too long. If that starts to annoy you, keep scrolling. You don't have to be condescending to anyone.
And I'm going to, I'll put my hand up, and then there are some times when I do see that, and my first initial response is to be like, I'll just post the link. I'll go find the page, the manual, just post the manual page. And then, an hour or two later, I'll be like, and I'll go back and edit it and be like, hey, great question. Here's where you can find that information.
Yeah, but that's fine. I mean, sometimes you don't, sometimes when people not help, but come with some remark that it's annoying, or you could look that up and it's been asked 24,000 times on this group. Yeah. And I know it can be annoying, but you could keep scrolling if it's annoying.
Yeah. Or if they can look it up, you can go look it up and just send them the link to the manual. The manual is quite easy to browse.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just there. Exactly. So that's cool. Like, I hope this helps some people with their files, and I want to, I want people to reach out if they have questions, if they're doing something in their file and it's maybe similar to what I've done, but they're trying to recreate it themselves. I'm happy to, try and figure it out with them.
And as we said in the beginning, we're going to put everything down. What we have, we're going to exchange all the links and all the stuff we talked about here. We can put it down in the description so people can find your file on GitHub and whatever should be relevant. We can put it down there. That's great.
Yeah, cool. And I've now changed my name on, I think, your Discord server, which I know you're not on very much, but my name's now Michael Green on there. So if people do have questions, they can tag me there. Or as I said, through the file, there's a link to the MA users Discord server, which I'm also on. So there's ways to contact me. Cool.
But let's
Thank you.
sign off for now and see you somewhere.
Yeah, sounds great. Awesome.
All right.
Catch you later.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening. Bye.
So this concludes this very long 2-part video with Michael Green from New Zealand. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you drop a like on the video. It's going to help my channel quite a bit, indicating to YouTube that you like the content. It will help it spread out to more people. Also, make sure you subscribe to the Event Lighting channel so you don't miss any future episodes. But as I said, I really hope you enjoyed this content, and I hope you learned something from Michael's file. Michael is available in our Discord server, so if you check the description down below, you will find a link so you can join the Discord server we have here on Event Lighting. But until I see you next time, I hope you have some happy GrandMA3 programming at home with Michael's file, or maybe your own file, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.